And yes, I just saw in the chat that you're happy to know this happens to professionals. Yes, it absolutely happens to all of us. While I'm loading my screen up, I'll let you know that probably, let's see, a few months into pandemic, we were doing a test with Bishop Curry to be able to do an Instagram live with him, and we accidentally went live with about 400 people with his face about this far away from the camera going, what do I do next? All right, so I'm going to try to share my second desktop here. You're just going to see my notes for a second because this is going to make this easier to do. All right, everybody have the presentation? Yes, we got it. So let's talk about virtual gatherings. And again, here's the link where you can download this. I always want to start not with a particular amount of tech or a particular software or tool or whatever we're using, because what I've found over doing this work is that's really all secondary. It's very important. The tech matters. How we do it matters, and it's gotten a lot more complicated in the last year. But if we go one step back, I think we can make some decisions about what we do going forward, whether it's all virtual or hybrid or in person, whether it's a website or a Sunday service. If we start with what is our overarching purpose, what is our big idea, what is it that we're trying to do, then we're able to answer better the question of how does digital ministry fit into my parish? How does live streaming fit into the mission of what I'm trying to do? And does it? And one of the things I like about this is once you answer the first question, or you begin to wrestle at least with it, then there's not really a right answer to the second question. There is, and this is the big secret, there is no right way across the board to do live streaming, to do digital worship. Everything is contextual. What works for a massive cathedral may not and probably won't work for a rural small parish. And the opposite is true. There's some things that are pretty good practices across the board, but I want to get you out of the mindset of that you have to do this right, that you have to do this a certain way, and that you have to do this like anybody else. Because the mission of your church and the call of your church is not what anyone else's is. And the best way that I've found to talk about this is to share a little about what the big idea is for our work in digital evangelism, what our work is in evangelism at a church-wide level. And there's some things that'll be different. There's some things that'll be hopefully very much the same. But as I walk you through how we make decisions, I think you'll find some things that you can use in your own decision making. When we started this work of digital evangelism, when I came back on back in 2017, and we were just beginning to figure this out, before we could make decisions about how we were going to use Facebook as an evangelism tool, or how we were going to update our website, or how our emails were going to work, we had to start with, what does it mean to do Episcopal evangelism? And we put some really smart people together, and they wrote a really good white paper because we're good Episcopalians. We had a task force. You can read our Blue Book report. And all that's really good, but day to day, it's a bit much. So what we worked on is drilling it down to one statement that explains what we do and who we are. And for us, this is the big idea. We seek, name, and celebrate Jesus' loving presence in the stories of all people, then invite everyone to more. That's it. That's what Episcopal evangelism is about from our perspective. Every class that we teach, every Facebook page we create, every video that we do seeks to do some part of this statement. Either we're seeking, we're looking for stories, we're naming God's presence in those stories, we're celebrating that Jesus is wherever we go. My personal favorite part of this definition is stories of all people. I came from an evangelical Southern Baptist background, and from a view of evangelism that our job was to bring Jesus to people. And the thing that I really, really love about the way we approach this is we believe that wherever we go, God is there. And our job isn't to be the experts. It isn't to convince folks of anything. It's to say, I see God in what's already happening here, or I see God's fingerprints on this. I see God in you. And then from there, you're inviting folks into that experience with you, and you're inviting them to lead. You're inviting them to be an equal part of it, not just the recipient of some special thing that you have. And for us, this definition has really worked. Because we did the work to drill it down and every single word in it means something, it gives us a really good measure to look at everything that we're doing, every program that we create, and we say, does this new initiative work toward fulfilling this mission? And if it does so, then it's a worthwhile effort. It may work, it may not, but we can learn from it either way. But it's very tempting, and I know you've all seen this in the last year, to see lots of new shiny things and new ways to do it, and lots of cool stuff, sometimes lots of overwhelming stuff. And that's absolutely true for us as well. But by having this big idea solidly clear, by starting there, we are able to say, all right, this is a really cool thing, but it takes away from our time that we could spend doing this. And I'll beat that point to death, and you'll hear me go back to this. But the question for you then is, what do you want to do? What are you called to do? And I bet if you look at that as a parish, as a ministry, your bottom line answer to that isn't do a really good Facebook Live. Now, that may be a tool that you use, but that in and of itself isn't the goal. We want to have the best graphics. We want to have a perfect visual identity. All of those things are tools in service to something else, hopefully something bigger. So the first step in a successful communication plan isn't to hire a communications professional or to have all the right tools or buy a new Mac, even though I'm very much a fan of buying a new Mac at any time. I will support that decision. But the most important thing is to understand your organization's identity, your goals, and your values. Take the time to have those conversations. I'm certain that most of you have done it. I'm certain that it's an ongoing process, but this time period right now, this new transition that we're in, where we're beginning to come out of this year of everything being online and everything being not exactly what we wanted, all the way to absolutely nothing like what we wanted, and we look at a new normal, this is a perfect time to gather your leaders, gather your congregation, and ask these questions of who we are. What do we want to be about? And I'm going to give you some time at the end of our time here for us to break out into small groups and actually talk about some of these questions. I'll give you some prompts to really think about the last year, think about what you did before the last year, during the last year, and what you want to do going forward. And the reason we spend time on this is all of your strategy is built on this foundation. And these are things that can survive no matter what the next pandemic, the next thing is that gets thrown at us. All of this is going to remain your foundation, even if the entire structure on top of it changes. I'll give you an example from the way that we have operated. Before the pandemic, my job as digital evangelist and as the manager for creative services was about 20 to 30% getting the message of the Episcopal Church out. We spent a good bit of our time working on the website, doing the different print materials that we needed, doing the work of 815. And about 25% of my time was spent on the road with the presiding bishop, doing his events. That was a big part of what I did. And then the other sort of half of my time was being out in the field, doing the in-person version of what we're doing right now, getting together with churches, doing trainings, working with our evangelism team, doing support for revivals and those types of events. Very busy, very hectic, very chaotic schedule, but I loved it. I can't wait to get back to those parts of it. And then in March of last year, 24 hours before the world shut down, I was in Liberia training communicators at Cuttington University and watching on CNN as all this was happening in the US, and really not just thinking it was going to be something. Of course, we were all going to be back in church by Easter, and then we were going to be back in church by Pentecost, and then of course by the summer, right? So we came back into this reality, and the first phase for us, I think, was very much like the first phase for all of you, just triage. How do we get Sunday morning on the internet? How do we transition? What do we do? And at that point, all of the other stuff that was my job didn't matter. We weren't traveling. We weren't doing presiding bishop things. We were canceling all of our events. And so my job became basically hold office hours on Facebook all day, every day, and talk with churches and help them get online. We started all the gear that we had in New York, we got it to my house, our entire studio of gear, all of our cameras. And I just started building live stream setups in my living room and then teaching folks how to use them. So we would find problems, we would solution the problems, and then we would put the word out about how to do that. And we did that for about 3 months of just helping people get online. And then our second phase sort of became, folks are sort of used to this. We've gotten most of the problems figured out for the short term. What do we do? Because this is going to be a while. We don't know how long, but the iPhone being handheld isn't going to work. So how do we start to build solutions for churches that need to be virtual? Everything from Zoom to Facebook Live to rebuilding websites. How do you shoot video? What are the things that we can put in place to help churches do this for whatever the duration of this is? And we learned a lot in that. We learned how to create some general solutions, and some of the stuff that I'm going to show you today came out of that phase. And alongside that, we learned how to do our own work. How do we get the message of the church out in this new way when the presiding bishop doesn't travel anymore, when he is also quarantined and the film crew can't come in? How do we build a camera rig that can go into his house and he can operate? And we started watching Colbert do it, and we watched Jimmy Fallon come back, and we watched late night happen every night. And we're like, well, we need to do that. If they can do it, Bishop Curry can do it. He's a techie. And so we built a rig that we shipped to him that he could take out, and we have a virtual way of doing all of our videoing, all the videos that you see. The thing that we did day before yesterday, I guess 2 days ago for the Chauvin verdict, was using that same technology. And I put some of that in here too, because there are pieces of that are simple enough for anybody to use. And the reason those things are still important is the third phase, which is the one that we're beginning to enter into now, which is the one I think isn't going to completely go away. Is how do we enter into the new reality of what church and worship is, where we have essentially built new red doors, new digital ways into the building, and people have come through them. I remember talking with some of the group on Nancy's call, and we were talking about the ways that folks from other parts of the country that have left that area, but they loved things about that parish, came back, and they experienced worship with that group of people that they were no longer physically in contact with. And when we move forward, we don't want to shut those doors. We don't want to close those off. So how do we create an experience that works traditionally for those that are in the room, and for the folks that have come in these new ways, these different ways, folks that may not have ever come in the doors of the church, but maybe they did and they're not going to come back in a traditional way? How do we stay connected to them and have everyone engage in the same experience, or at least engage in a common experience, even if it's not exactly the same? And here's the spoiler alert: I don't have the answer to that question. I have some ideas. I have a lot of experience, and I can guide you in some typical practices, but this is part of why we build on the foundation of what you're about, because the answer to that is going to change how you present, how you engage folks digitally. What do I mean by that? There are churches and programs that are passionate about music, and they have an incredible music program. And that's something that they have found in the time of pandemic. They found ways to expand further, that they've gotten out beyond the walls for people that don't come in. And to do that digitally, there's a level of technology that is required. There's a level of investment that can be required that's very different from a parish whose core is formation together and community together, where you have an incredible coffee hour or adult formation hour, and that's what you really have connected around as a Bible study. You can do that very differently, and there's not one that's more right or more wrong, but each of those is central to who you are. And again, we're going to get into some of those questions of how you reflect back and how you look forward. But I wonder, this is a good place to pause for just a second and see if there's any reflection, anything that comes up for you initially that you want to make sure I touch on, or just any comment on what we've talked about so far. It's also okay to put these things in the chat if you have them. Elsa has her hand raised. Yes.
I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say, and this is such a hot issue for all of our churches. And I just want to put in there that for the average rector, when we think about what we're trying to do, the evangelism is just one piece of so many things that we're supposed to be trying to do. And I love that I heard you use the word simple, because I don't have an evangelization department.
Sure. Right.
I'm not sure I can even find people to hold the GoPro. So I'm not sure what we're going to do, but I'm really interested in everything you're going to say.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important point. And I've done consulting with a number of churches that are very excited to do the digital stuff. And sometimes the great gift and curse is that, you know, there's a member that has some financial means, and they say, you know what, I'm going to donate the money to put in a live stream system. And then there's consultants that are coming in and like, okay, this is great, but this also requires 4 people a Sunday to run it. And bigger isn't always better. How do we do what we can do without just putting more burden on the same people who have been doing all of the things? And so that's absolutely clear. Another question from Jenny, I'm looking at the other screen here to look at the chat, is first step is to find a way to support the necessary infrastructure. Absolutely. Absolutely right. Is where are you now, and what is a very practical next step? And so this is a good place for me to get into. I want to walk through a bit of some of the tools for the work, some of the things that as I've created solutions for churches, as I've worked with churches, there are really three very general areas of price points to make this stuff happen. And some of the folks that are on this call will have entered one of these levels, and you want to go to the next one. Some of you have entered and that's where you want to stay, and some of you want to find a totally different way to do it. The first one that I try to create for everyone is free. If you have no additional budget to do this, if there's no more funding and no more people, how do you do the digital thing? So I try to provide some solution in hardware and software that lets you do that. The second is sort of a middle of the road price point. If I can, we found $500 in the budget, we can grab one piece of equipment. What should it be? And then also recognizing that there are places that have the means and the vision and the calling and passion to make this a real big invested part of what they do, and there's ways to do that too. But before I jump in, I want to remind everyone that none of these solutions is the right one. If you look at it and the one that your church is able to do is a smartphone and Facebook Live, you're not failing compared to the church that can spend $50,000 on it. I want you, if you come away with nothing else, to leave not disheartened that you're not doing enough, or that you're not doing it right, or that you should be doing it differently. Because as Elsa said, this is one part of what you're called to do. This is not, we're not all suddenly production studios and the rest of ministry doesn't matter. There's still hospital visits. There's still parishioners to care for. There's still buildings to take care of. All those things still exist. So we want this to operate within what you're doing and not just be another burden. So here endeth the sermon. First thing to look at is cameras. How do you get the picture out, and how do you get a good stream? You can do this with a smartphone. And if that's all you ever do, that's okay. We had churches before the pandemic and during the pandemic that wanted to get the message out just to those folks that couldn't be there on Sunday because they're shut in, because they're sick, because they're elderly. And they took a smartphone, laid it on the pulpit, and did the sermon with Facebook Live. And that's absolutely okay. I put in some other options here. Again, I'm not going to go over deep specifics of each of these, but you have the slides. You can look at these. I just wanted to give you some basic price points. I will take a moment to note that if you are looking for the one thing that would be the piece of gear that you get that takes you from smartphone to a really good production that one person can run, even if it's the rector without anybody else, I highly suggest looking into Mevo. It's an all-in-one little tiny camera that has a really good microphone in it. It works without having to plug it into anything else, but you can plug it into a sound system if you want to go bigger. But it's very small. One of the things that we've run into as we're trying to go into a hybrid worship is, well, we ran cables all over the room to do live streaming when it was just the live stream. But what do you do when you actually have a congregation in the room? Mevo is a great way to get around that because it's about 3 inches and it doesn't even require a tripod. It just sits on a mic stand and it all runs off of an iPhone or an Android phone. There's no other hardware. It doesn't need a computer. It will stream out. And there is a church here in Philadelphia that's on the University of Pennsylvania's campus where we set this up, and it's just the rector. She puts the phone on the pulpit, hits go, and then it just streams out, and there's nothing else to it, but she gets the full service. You get the sound, you get all of it. So Mevo is a really good piece of software to look at, or hardware to look at. And then you can get into PTZ cameras. These are remote cameras. We have a number of churches that I've done installs with, that I've consulted with, that we've put one or more of these in. And this is where you start getting into a really more complex multi-camera production. I have built systems that have as many as 3 or 4 cameras built in a way that one person can run it all. There's a church in Bryn Mawr, I think, right outside of Philadelphia, where we did a 3-camera system, sound, all of it, and one person's able to run it. They've got about 7 or 8 people trained, so they have a rotation of folks. They have some youth. The youth are always a great go-to for finding your tech folks to help out. And they're running multi-camera professional productions, and it took them about 6 weeks to learn how to do it. So they're finding ways to integrate that to stream the service out. We've hooked it into their Zoom early morning service, so they have an element of the folks at home being able to participate. So there are options to do things like that. The next thing that I would suggest after you get the picture out, but equal in importance, is really good audio is important. Even I would say more important than spending money on a camera. If you have one place to spend money, get as good a sound as you can. And remember that sound is very different in online than it is in the room. You know, you may not need a microphone in a small chapel, but you are not going to talk loud enough to go across the internet. We got to have a microphone. And so $80, you can get a mic that hooks into your phone. And again, there's Android and iPhone options for that. There's lots and lots of different things out there. And again, I want to just give you some ideas of things to search for. And if there are specific questions, I can answer those. But you can start at $30 for something that just clips onto a lapel, and you can get a sermon out, all the way up to you can spend thousands of dollars on sound to get into video. The one piece of equipment that I really love is this Focusrite. It's a couple $100s. It works really, really well with the Mevo. If you have a sound system already, the cool thing about this is it plugs in directly to the Mevo and doesn't require power. So you can run mixed audio into the Mevo that runs on a battery. And again, you've got a whole option that doesn't require running electrical cables all over the room. Hank says, for the Mevo audio, a suggested mic. Again, this Focusrite one is really good because it lets you use any mic you want. So any kind of microphone that you have. This Rode NTG mic is also really, really good, and it will plug in either to the Mevo. The Mevo also has 2 really good built-in microphones. So even if you don't use a separate microphone, you'll get a really good sound from up to about 30 or 40 feet away. For example, we used only a Mevo in the press rooms at General Convention back in 2018 with no other mics plugged into it at all. We just used that to do all of our press conferences. Worked totally fine. Last thing is on the hardware side is lighting and stabilizing. This is much less important now that we're in a hybrid mode. This is a slide I had really when folks were trying to create this in their home and we were trying to get good video. Lighting in the room is going to be pretty much what it is. One of the great things about most smartphones with the Mevo and even up to the PTZ cameras is they're really good at auto adjusting to even low light. So if you're doing evening services, you're doing Compline, or if you're just in a church that has a lot of stained glass and dark stone and it's just not very bright, most cameras are pretty good at getting a good picture. The only thing additional I would say is grab a tripod of some kind. Even if you're using a smartphone, get a desktop tripod, get a small tripod from Target or Amazon. You can get them for $20, $30, and it just gives you a stable picture that helps folks from being distracted by a shaky picture. So it's a really simple way to get it out of somebody's hands and have them. Any other particular hardware questions? I'm going to move into some of the software tools that we use and how we stream things out. I'm going to look here in the chat, but in the meantime, if you've got a hardware particular question, feel free to jump in and ask that. Got a really good question from Richard here in the chat. Have I been any part of the discussions at 8:15 of the nature of the ritual as it pertains to online worship? Is there a line between entertainment and participation? This is a really good question. How do you do this effectively? Public social action, and how do you mirror the faith of the church and you do that online? It's difficult. It takes really concerted effort to bring the folks that are watching online into the experience of more than just watching. And one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what about Eucharist? And there's absolutely no way that I will give you an answer to that question. That is for your bishops and for your committees that handle such things. But what I will focus on is how do you engage that audience? And one of the things that I like to ask churches is, how do you engage the folks that are in the room? You have a service leaflet. You have the songs. They have hymn books. So the churches that I've seen do this on Facebook Live, they will post those PDFs, those documents in the chat of the Facebook Live. I think one of the ways that you get participation is think about having digital ushers. Have someone that is a volunteer or on staff, if you can do that, who their ministry on Sunday morning is to engage that audience. And that's everything from saying welcome to letting them know where we are in the service to posting those leaflets. And I may have told this story when I was with Nancy's group, but there was a moment for me, and it was before the pandemic, where I realized that the people online really are participants. And that moment for me was when we were live streaming Holy Week in 2018 from a congregation here in Pennsylvania. And my job, the film crew had their whole thing. They don't let me touch the cameras because they're better than I am at it. So my job was to run the Facebook Live. And we got to the moment of passing the peace, and we had about 2,000 people watching the service online. It was the Great Vigil service. And they got to the peace, and the celebrant said, "The peace of the Lord be always with you." And I just typed into the chat, I said, "Peace be with you." And I got about 400 people say, "And also with you, and also with you, and also with you, and also with you." And for me, that was the moment that I realized they're not watching TV, they're participating in the worship. And it looks different than anything I'd ever seen before. But one of the first steps, I think, is to really have a mindset that these folks are part of worship in whatever way that is possible. And then do whatever you can to engage them, make them part of the announcements, welcome them. Alana has her hand raised.
I do. I'm doing the double hand. So I just want to kind of glean some of the other questions in the chat for you to speak to or comment on. Duncan had a question about any conversation around the ethical challenges of social media and tracking, explicitly referring to the Netflix documentary of the social dilemma in terms of moving forward with digital ministry.
Yeah, that's something we've wrestled with, is what data do we use and how do we use it on the church-wide level where we have a large pool of it. Part of it for us is realizing that by entering into that, we are giving some of that data. We're in that space, and there's not a ton that we can do other than be ethical in our own choices about it and how we engage. We don't ask folks to do any kind of login or provide any kind of information other than what they want to provide. So we sort of leave that up to them. We also try where possible to stream to places that aren't social media platforms, like using YouTube or Vimeo to stream to your Facebook page. Because one of the things we realize is not everybody has or wants a Facebook account. The thing that they do that really helps them is they make it free, and they use that as a tool to get people on the platform. But if you want to avoid that, or at least provide another option, one of the things that I'll show you in the software is that there are tools that you can get to stream this just to your Facebook page to your website. And then it's just an online stream that really doesn't require any sort of login or data other than what people are already giving to go to a site.
Excellent. Another comment was from Jay, just regarding the ability to kind of scout around to see what others are doing in terms of harnessing knowledge and information, but also knowing that there might be a gap somewhere else. So I think that's just worthy to say. Jay, I'm not sure if you have anything else to comment on about that.
Yeah, just wondering, Jeremy, if rather than all of us developing or honing our big idea and then plowing that furrow, is there a sense in which we look to Alana or the bishop? Because it's not clear to me that we need to be doing everything for all of our folks if other people in the diocese or even elsewhere are doing it better. So it's just, I guess it's one of the things that makes this discernment so challenging.
Sure. And that's a great question, is where are the things that you can share in ways that you couldn't before because it's digital instead of everybody doing everything. I absolutely would say your diocesan office is a great place to start within your diocese. I would also say that beyond that, across the Episcopal Church, the single best resource we have for where this is happening and how is the Episcopal Communicators Facebook group. It's a free group that it's a private group, but anybody that's connected to a church can join it. It's got about 3,000 members, and it's a very, very active group. So if you have a question about, hey, is anybody doing a virtual compline? Does anybody have a digital bulletin for this right to service already created? In about 10 minutes, you'll get an answer and somebody will have it for you. Have you created these graphics? Where are you getting the video? So if you just search Episcopal Communicators on Facebook, they also have, it's an organization that is affiliated with the Episcopal Church. They have a dues paying membership organization that's got, I sit on their board, we've got about 400 paying members. It's like $75 a year, and they have a dedicated listserv, and they're also a very active group by email and with their annual conference of some best practices and ideas. And those two places beyond your diocese is where I would start with best practices and who's doing what.
Excellent. And then another comment in the chat was from Marjorie, which addresses kind of having a lot of readers and leaders who want to stay home and integrating them and showing them in the nave, even when people are so resistant to having screens in the nave. So
right.
I don't know if you could solve that one, Jeremy, but
no really one-term solution. I have actually seen there's one church in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I don't remember the name of it, but they were in the midst of the pandemic. They were already doing some remodeling in their sanctuary. They had about 50 people that were coming to church on Sunday. And when they went virtual, they have about 100 on Zoom. And so they made the decision that the connection with those folks and in a hybrid model was, again, go back to that, what are we about? Like what is most important to us? And for them, the answer was to build that community. even more than their space. So they put 2 screens in the front of the church, and they will keep Zoom connected to their in-person worship. So they have a camera system that's set up that actually feeds into Zoom. So in their space, they have the faces of the other people, and everybody can see each other. And it's a very modern and sort of out there solution for most of our churches. And for a lot of reasons, it doesn't always work practically to be able to physically see those folks. But as Sandy said here in the comments, even just doing things to remind folks that that the hybrid or that the online audience is there, doing those things to acknowledge them during the announcements at the beginning of the service. My home parish, where my wife is a priest, they began their service by saying, during the time of Eucharist, we will follow social distancing guidelines. For those of you at home, you can follow along in the bulletin. So they are acknowledging at the same times both groups. Sandy, I'd love for you to add to that. Oh, you're muted.
We've started acknowledging the names of the people that are on Facebook Live. And so that they're part of the congregation, and then reading aloud the messages that they're putting into the chat on Facebook Live.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Especially the prayers of the people.
Yeah, so just finding those ways for the parts that can be participatory to engage those in the service. And yeah, that might mean the person that's reading the prayers has the list of names of those who are sick, and they've got a Facebook chat up, which is,
well, our deacon and I, we have our smartphones with us, so
there you go.
You know, we try not to be too obtrusive with them, but
sure.
Yeah.
Any others, Alana?
Not that I'm seeing. A lot of good feedback.
I do want to jump through a couple more slides. I'm not going to go into these in detail. I want to leave some time at the end. I just want to show you what the next 2 sections are, and you can look at these in detail. But I put in some hardware. So there's really 3 parts to a live stream, and a lot of you have figured this out by now. There's the camera, sound, that's 1. 2 is what's the hardware that gets it onto the internet, and then the 3rd is what software do you use to stream it. So this is section 2. Basic tools that you can use if you want to go past the Mevo. This Magwell unit and the Blackmagic unit are both really good at taking any camera that has an HDMI port and turning it into a webcam. So if you've got a really good Canon camera that has an HDMI port and you don't want to buy another camera, you can use one of these to turn it into a webcam. And this Teradek unit, if you're doing outside services, if what you decided to do for spring, summer, and fall is tent services, and you want to stream from one camera directly out, this is a cool unit that lets you do it over cell phone service. So you don't even have to have Wi-Fi. So it's a bit of an investment, but it's a really good piece. When my wife and I did our pandemic wedding on the steps of the Philly Art Museum, we rented one of these and just had it hooked to a camera, and we were able to live stream it out without any sort of tech, which is kind of cool. And then the next thing is, if you really want to get into switching multiple cameras, Blackmagic is a company I would suggest you check out. They were built to create hardware for houses of worship. So they've really brought the price point way, way, way down on really good tech. So this is a good place to try out. And then there's the link in the link tree to Lens Rentals. And this is a fantastic company that if you want to try something out, if your church is thinking about a $2,500 PTZ camera, but you're not sure, you can rent any of this gear for a week. They do it with microphones, soundboards, cameras. We use them for our shoots all the time. You can rent things for 3 days or 3 months and try out some new things and see what works for you before you make a big investment in it. So I'll just leave that with you. And then finally, software. How do you get this stuff streamed out? Vimeo Pro is what we use with most of the churches I work with. We use it as the Episcopal Church. It's a powerhouse product. One of the things that it lets you do is you can, like I was saying, you could stream it to your Facebook account, but also to YouTube and to your website. Vimeo lets you do that. There's another service called Restream. There's a number of them out there now that let you simulcast to a lot of places. And essentially what that means is instead of your church having to have enough broadband speed to push streams to a lot of different places, using something like Vimeo or Restream lets you stream out just once, and then their servers take care of getting it in all those different places. Colin, let you jump in here.
I just have a quick question on streaming. We are running into, as we start to transition back into person, we're one of the kind of churches that we lean on Zoom. We have the TV in the church to see our participants. But I'm growing increasingly frustrated for the limitations of Zoom in terms of audio video. Have you found a service that simulates the live sort of auditorium feel of a Zoom call like this, where everyone can see each other's faces, that also allows for more creator control over what's seen? So something like a Streamlabs, where you kind of have different speakers can come in and share images and video.
There's not an easy way. Nobody has yet developed the tool. There's a free version of a software that's like a live stream studio called OBS that some of you, yeah. And some folks have done some work to bring in like everybody's webcam feed into OBS and then just basically create tiles of screens. It's a bit processor intensive. It's not an easy solution. It works for like conferences and one-off things, but for every week, there's just nothing out there that's that good yet. I wish I had a better answer to that, but it's just not quite there. Teams is doing some things with it, and Microsoft, they're trying some different stuff, but they're not as far as Zoom is. So, but it's one of those things that I'll keep my eyes on, and one of those things I'll put in like the Episcopal Communicators group as I see new things come out. There's also a live, if any of you are Reddit folks, there's a live streaming subreddit where some folks are trying some things out like this. So you can dig around in some of those. But as far as a solution that I would hand off to a church, there's just nothing there yet. Again, the second solution is Zoom. And this is the one that's really the standard for having lots of different folks on screen doing different things. So you can have different readers, you can have different leaders, and everybody just sort of highlights their video. We're all familiar with Zoom. The last one that we have found that has become an absolutely essential tool for our work is Streamyard. It's really pretty cost-effective price point, lets you stream to different places. Again, you can stream it to your website, you can stream it to Facebook, but this does give you the creative control of your people on camera. The difference is you don't get all the participants on screen. But if, for example, you have 6 or 8 different readers or lectors, celebrants, different people that are in the service, and you want to have control over, we want to highlight this person on the screen, we want to put 2 readers on the screen. We did a virtual passion reading that worked really well this way, because you have a producer on the back end sort of with the script, and then you can just highlight the right person's video. And it's sort of that next step from Zoom. The other thing is this records in full 1080 audio and video. So every video with Bishop Curry comes from Streamyard. This is how we record all of his stuff. It does a really good job of giving us solid recordings and streams without really a lot of lag, and we get some good control to just give it a little bit slicker look. So there's another company called Riverside, I think, that does this as well, but Streamyard's worked really well for us. And then the last one,
just for clarity, so but with Streamyard, you're just getting it's almost like a Zoom webinar in the you just have a few people on screen.
Yeah, so think about it as it's sort of like having a video switcher, but all digital. So the producer sees what you're seeing on the screen here. They see everybody along the bottom, so you can have up to 10 cameras that are there. I can solo them. I can put 2 on the screen. You can do some fancy stuff with backgrounds. You can share a desktop screen. So if I had one presenter and then like their slides, you can make that look really good. So if you're doing say a Compline or a service where you wanted to put the communal prayers up, you can make it look great with this. But again, it's only the folks that you have invited into being part of the presentation, and then you have somebody whose job is to control it all. One of the good things about this is if you have it connected to your Facebook page and you say you were doing worship this way, those Facebook comments that we were talking about do show up right in the stream. So the people that are on screen, instead of having to look in different places, you can see all of those comments. And if you stream it to, say, 3 different Facebook pages and a YouTube page, all those comments collapse into one place, which is a really cool feature for things like prayer vigils. We did the 24-hour prayer vigil that we did on Monday, Thursday last year. We did through Streamyard. And we just brought on different people every hour. We had the comments running through for prayers and worked really nicely. Again, like I said, I always like to give a free option. Facebook Live is that. It's limited in that you've got to have a Facebook account to use it. One of the other questions that I get regularly is how do you get the folks that don't have access to internet or video? And that's one of the areas where Zoom is really good because there's also a call-in option. And so for those folks who don't have internet speed or they don't have computer access, but you still want them to be part of the service, you can provide a call-in number for them to at least hear the audio from the service that's going out on Zoom. And that's been a really good feature as well. Last thing I want to give you is in the slides, is this is how to get a hold of me. And please, 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 at any time, feel free to reach out. I troubleshoot live streams and embed codes for websites. Our whole team does this. If you come up to a video problem and you're not sure how to get the shot you want, I'll connect you with our director of photography and our multimedia team that works with Bishop Curry, and they'll walk through your camera settings. It's part of what our call is. It's part of that telling the stories of all people is helping you tell your stories. So we want to help you do that any way that we can. And so a couple of resources that I will share with you, particularly from the questions that came in before we started this, is on the Episcopal Church Facebook page, on the Episcopal Church, or on Bishop Curry's Facebook page, and on the Episcopal Church website, we have collections of prayers from the BCP that we have videoed. A lot of them with Bishop Curry, but we're also building a catalog of prayers that we've shot with other people in other places. We have a service called TEC Stock, TEC STOCK, that you can search for. That is an open source image gallery, sort of like iStock Photo or Lightstock for Episcopal images. So a lot of our high definition, really good quality, best shots that we've taken across the church, we have those available to use in whatever way you want. They come completely unlicensed, and so you can take those, use them in whatever creative way you want. But I want to stop sharing there and find you guys again. There we go. And then I want to let our hosts sort of let us know what we're doing from here. I do have some questions for you to talk about in breakout time. But if there's anything else we want to talk about before, I know we'll have a few minutes after as well to talk about some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So we will use the next, I think it's 10 after, so 15 minutes for group, Alana with a nod, and then 5 minutes.
And the gang's all here.
Well, I know that we're at time and honoring that space that we've committed to. I just want to say a huge thank you to Jeremy for making the time to be with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is the most fun I will have today, and I can show you my calendar to prove it. But this is great. I've enjoyed it immensely.
That's great. And we'll look forward to being in touch with you, Jeremy.
Absolutely, yes. Reach out. Like I said, anytime. You've got my contact information. Alana has it as well. So if and I will email a copy of this presentation to you, Alana, so you can pass that around as well. So if folks didn't get it in the link, you'll have it and my contact information as well.
Great.